Hello, and welcome to the Andover Political Review International segment. Today's roundtable discussion revolves around the recent Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Participating in our discussion will be APR's expert panel, Rohan Sinha, John Swain, Alex Romanis, and Gregory Polker McGee. All right, so we'll start off with our first question. Many prominent politicians, including presidential candidates from both parties, have denounced the TPP agreement because it would make it easier for companies to ship American jobs to countries where labor is cheaper. Is there any evidence for this, or is this sentiment a baseless ploy designed to appeal to the American worker?
So the fact that there's bipartisan efforts to end this agreement or change it is kind of seems like has evidence behind it. So on the left, Bernie Sanders says, and I quote, "I am disappointed but not surprised by the decision to move forward on this disastrous Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement that will hurt consumers and cost American jobs." And then on the right, Mitch McConnell says that he has some serious problems with what I think it is, and there's significant pushback all over the place. So from this, we can kind of gather that there is evidence that this will possibly ship American jobs overseas.
Certainly before, when we've seen trade agreements like this, such as the North American Free Trade Agreement, trade agreements in our modern times, pretty large scale, this one constituting countries that make up about 40% of the GDP, of the world GDP. One trade agreement that's comparable to the Trans-Pacific is the North American Free Trade Agreement. During the time, politicians supporting the legislature of NAFTA were saying that jobs would increase, or employment would increase, and it turns out plenty of experts have come out on the subject, including such as writers of the Huffington Post have said that 682,000 jobs were lost as a result of the NAFTA agreement. There have been, so this is quite a similar case. Politicians such as John Kerry have come out and said that 685,000 jobs will be created, and that is solely based on the GDP increase, the increase in the U.S. GDP, which is projected by some economists based on classical economics that are planned based off of this GDP increase that American income will grow and on average, and that this will translate to job increase, but that's just false. Countries with lower wages or with lower national wages are where big corporations will go, especially with the abolishing of tariffs between all the countries in the TPP, and that's where big corporations will. Simply, that's
yeah. So this agreement will be pitting the U.S. against other countries in Asia for jobs, and then since these other countries might have not as high standards for work, then the jobs will just go over there, right?
Yeah, there definitely is a threat for the American worker, because we do this at this moment right now. We outsource jobs to other countries, and Southeast Asia is full of cheap labor that we could outsource our countries to,
jobs.
Yeah, we could outsource our jobs, yeah. And that could be disastrous for the American economy, as Bernie Sanders has said, because obviously cheap labor means that the companies will outsource their jobs, and then American workers will lose their jobs, and that could result in an even higher unemployment rate than we have right now, which could end up being disastrous for the USA.
Yes, and isn't this agreement kind of about U.S. versus China kind of relations, right? So we have to see if we can sacrifice our jobs for us being competitive versus China in the future.
I definitely have to disagree with you on that. Although, yes, if you nitpick, there were some manufacturing jobs lost to the North American Free Trade Agreement. However, as a result of NAFTA, it sort of enhanced free trade amongst the North American nations. For example, for the 14-year period after NAFTA was enacted, the U.S. service imports, services that include banking services, telecommunication services, insurance services, the exports from the United States to Canada and Mexico tripled from 27 billion to 92 billion. So, although yes, manufacturing jobs are lost, it sort of opens up the economy and increases the amount of available goods and services. Additionally, the increased trade does create jobs in the sense. Although yes, manufacturing jobs are lost due to outsourcing, the agreement does enhance the economy. And like for example, in the 14-year period after the NAFTA agreement, U.S. GDP shot up 49%, which is a super significant percent. And so currently in 2014, there were 14 million jobs that relied on trade between Mexico and Canada, and approximately 5 million of those were the result of the NAFTA agreement.
That is true. This could be a larger step towards globalization as well, when you think about it, because the more or the better the relationship is between the U.S., Canada, and other countries in Asia per se,
except for
besides
China,
China,
right?
yeah, besides
Right.
China. Well, we already lose enough jobs to China.
We gotta
yeah.
get rid of China.
I know.
Okay.
We already lose enough jobs to China, so this could be the beginning of coalition, have you, against China and to further the American economy.
So then, but it's still, we could be, instead of losing jobs to like China, we might just be losing them to other Asian countries.
That's
Possibly.
true. That is a significant threat.
Going back to Rohan's point, I don't disagree with you, Rohan, that the economy won't do better. When you abolish tariffs, simply prices go down on imported goods, and that allows the American consumer obviously to buy more as prices go down.
All right, on to our next question. Limiting the authority of border inspectors, this agreement would allow for potentially unsafe food to enter the United States market. Is this a legitimate threat to the health of Americans?
I agree that yes, by reducing trade barriers, it does threaten the safety of the American people. However, the question sort of really underestimates the power of U.S. consumers. For example, if you look at Chipotle, it's like in the BU Chipotle, or BC, I really don't remember, there's that E. coli scandal where a certain amount of students who ate there got E. coli, and the whole nation was in uproar about it, and Chipotle stocks fell by a significant amount and still have not recovered, even though it's been 2 or 3 months. So if a country does decide to pursue the business risk of sending potentially unsafe food to the United States, they will definitely face the wrath of the U.S. consumers. And the U.S. consumers do have a significant power base. They have a public opinion that has destroyed numerous companies in the past 50 or so years.
The market will just, like the invisible hand in the market will just kind of do it for you.
I agree that it is a risk.
We don't need regulation.
I agree that it is a risk to remove regulations, but it's not like there aren't any remaining safeguards left.
Yeah, the thing is, if you sacrifice health for just letting the invisible hand, as you said, do its thing, which, I mean, eventually it will, but at what cost, really? We could let some foreign virus or whatever, or we don't really know the exact conditions of every factory or that processed food comes from, because I would assume that most of the food that's going to be shipped here will be processed, and you really don't know exactly the conditions. But I do agree that eventually it would level out, and the American consumers would figure out which companies and which countries sent the good stuff and which ones sent the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Additionally, so based on this, the amount of tariffs and stuff, preventing unsafe foods from entering the United States would decrease. But I feel that with the reduction of those, there would be an increase in private companies started by Americans that sort of identify which goods and services are not safe for Americans, and they would also sort of kind of like the Better Business Bureau, but on an international scale, but funded by private investors.
Yeah, but how responsive are Americans to like this sort of thing? Because we've seen like numerous like exposés on like McDonald's and how that's bad for you, yet it's super popular here. Like,
That's a very good point.
like, isn't McDonald's a legitimate threat to the health of Americans?
I feel like unsafe food, that means spoiled or damaged foods.
Yeah.
Yeah, McDonald's is pretty unhealthy, but a lot of people go there for socioeconomic reasons. It's not
That's true.
necessarily about the food.
I wouldn't. Yeah, going back to Greg's point, I don't really liken this situation to McDonald's food being bad for you. We're talking about two instances in which food is bad for you. Two different instances. We're talking about spoiled food that could potentially harbor bacteria that's actually harmful. That's harmful to your body, and your immune system can actually get you sick. Versus eating fast food, which isn't inherently bad for you in the sense that you can't become sick from an organism that lives in it, or per se, and it's not inherently or so obviously dangerous. It's two different situations. Certainly, with Chipotle as well, is an interesting example for you to bring up, Rohan. Quite a few people, Americans that I've seen interviews done based on this topic, have actually said that they still will go to eat Chipotle, simply based on the fact that it's such a popular restaurant. It's socially regarded as very, it's just very popular, and it's socially regarded as having very good food. So a lot of people, if we're talking about kids, people who are younger maybe, or people who are maybe less educated, a lot of them, I would actually assume, don't really care about the Chipotle E. coli outbreak. I think a lot of people just assume that, just right now even, in the last month, I'm pretty sure, or 2 months, Chipotle had to close a lot of its stores to check for health concerns, and yet I see lines of Chipotle every day.
Yeah,
Even days like very close to the day, even days close to when they had to do these closings to check for to do health inspections.
That's true. I think that should just bring back to the McDonald's metaphor. There is that if you have a certain other benefits, like socioeconomic benefits to eating there, if this food was brought in, this is foreign food here that maybe was potentially unsafe in some way, shape or form, but it was still was beneficial in other ways. Like maybe it was cheap, maybe it had a nice marketing campaign that McDonald's throws millions of dollars into their marketing, and then that might outweigh it. We know the facts about Chipotle or McDonald's, but people still go there. So is there any we could draw a comparison to something like this could happen?
Yeah, I agree that people still go there, but its prominence, during its inception and its fame in the 90s, has definitely gone down.
Countries that were involved with the TPP and their respective governments did not disclose any information about the deal to the public because they were worried their leverage in the negotiations would be compromised. Yet, in the United States, more than 500 representatives from corporations had access to the full text of the agreement. Is there any cause of concern based on this discrepancy?
Yes, so I'd say yes, there's a lot of cause for concern. So the only way that members of Congress were able to view this document was they have to go into this special secured room, and they can take no electronic devices, no computers, no phones. They can't walk out with any notes. They can't take any notes on this agreement. They can go in there and they can read about the agreement, but they cannot come out to the public and actually talk about any specifics in this agreement. And the press could not see it, the public could not see it, and I think this speaks loads about who this agreement is actually going to benefit if they are so scared that if anyone other than corporations or corporate representatives can read it.
I
Well,
definitely agree, because I feel like if the public is not allowed to know, at all, then there should be some cause for concern, because what could they be hiding from us, the public? I'm pretty sure it took WikiLeaks to leak the information to
Yes,
actually
that's
get it out
true.
to the public, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. When you give corporations this power to know everything that's going on, but you don't give your own citizens who will, we might lose our jobs. Well, not we, but the American people might actually lose jobs because of this agreement, and they can't actually see what's on the document for themselves.
Yes, I agree fully with that.
The relationship of a corporation and consumer is that a corporation sells some sort of product to a consumer, and the consumer spends much more than what the product cost and gives it to the corporation. So a corporation does not necessarily represent the safety or the welfare or the true interests of the consumer. So the fact that 500 corporations had a huge say in this agreement and the people of the United States had less of a say in the agreement is kind of scary.
Yeah, going back to when, like, just the sheer security placed on this document, especially the information that he said about how difficult it was for a congressman to get access to such an agreement, is and the ease at which these heads of these corporations are able to gain access to the document is just pretty astounding. The comparison or the contrast between the two, seeing that our representative, the people, the fundamental value of this country is that the people. Well, maybe I'm going too far with that, but the fact that the representatives who represent the people of this country and who represent their views and what they want and what the people want in general, and the people and the representatives who are going to decide whether to make this actual legislature are not allowed easier access than corporate heads who are simply looking for to make money, to make profit at the expense of well,
The
their
American
workers.
people?
Yeah, American
Yes.
people, their workers. Just their primary goal being that they want to make the highest profit possible. Is
Yeah.
just
There's
absurd.
definitely a
And-
threat that monopolies could arise from this if you give 500 companies or representatives from corporations access to the document beforehand. They could be a major concern for corporation control over more influence in politics in the world per se. Like, I don't think it should corporations should have as much of power in politics as this or the TPP seems to be giving them.
Yeah, and that's
Greg
that's
will
kind
be
of like
our last opinion.
and that's the whole problem lies in exactly how it was created. Like, because of the fast track, this is all like let happen because of this how it was negotiated, which means like it was approved officially by these 12 countries, United States, Canada, and many Asian countries, on February 4th, but the Congress is going to vote on it. But the thing is that Congress was not able to have any negotiation in the making of it. All they're going to be able to do is say yes or no. So that's what's going to come down to, and there's bipartisan support against it and for it. So it's going to be interesting to see when they vote on it.
The TPP aids name brand drug companies by strengthening patent protections for medicine. These patent protections will make it harder for generic drugs to be produced, leading some experts to claim that the TPP exports the steep drug prices in the U.S. to other countries. Will the patent protections harm patients in Asia who rely on cheap generics for treatment? Can we reconcile the demands for generic drugs with the stringent patent protections the agreement mandates?
I would say that the TPP, it gives a lot of power to the pharmaceutical companies, which already is a huge booming business, really. And there's some safety, like some dangers in safety protocol and health protocol that come with that, with giving the pharmaceutical companies like more power. For example, right now in the USA, there's a testing period of 12 years for a drug. So say you have a painkiller and you want to put it out there, you have to have a 12-year testing period. So test it in a lab and make sure that there's no awful effects. But the TPP actually wants to, well, since other countries like Brunei have 0 years for a testing period and Japan has 8, which is still less, they actually want to decrease our testing period for drugs, which could mean more dangers for the public because we wouldn't be able to see long-term effects as easily. And I feel like this could actually be a major issue for the health of the American people.
Yeah, going off of that, I think it is harmful in other ways, not just the power the pharmaceutical companies has. Well, in the power they have in determining the prices
Definitely.
of these drugs. For example, there are many volunteer health organizations that work to get treatment to Africa to AIDS patients, malaria patients. And they rely on price competition. So we've been talking about this entire time how economically the TPP actually benefits countries economically. In this sense, it's actually not doing that. It's doing the exact opposite by
It's forming like a monogamous trade.
In this ruling in this trial period, in this 12-year trial period that Swain mentioned, that the U.S. imposes, it would also have to be imposed on the other 11 countries in the TPP. The U.S. has the highest trial time of any of these nations. So by imposing, and that's the way that other countries, other pharmaceutical companies are actually able to compete with U.S. firms, is by getting drugs out there quicker. They don't necessarily need to, or they don't necessarily value the safety as much, but by getting it out there quicker, they can sell, maybe if there's a breakthrough in medicine, that they can actually get a drug out there, incorporating that breakthrough, say like a genetic breakthrough of some sort, into their medicine. So if all the countries have the same trial time, U.S. companies, U.S. pharmaceutical companies, which are much larger, and are able to produce these things at a faster rate inherently, will have the advantage clearly. So that they will be able to
doesn't
spike
sound
prices.
like much of like a free trade thing, right? So, like free trade, free market, that kind of dictates that we should have like a level playing field here, right? And that like the gigantic companies, if they want to charge $3,000 or $30,000, however much they want to charge for a drug, there can be another company that'll charge less, and then it'll profit more, right? It'll do better because more people will buy it.
Yeah. See, there's also a danger in Asia because obviously with trade, our trade is going to affect Asia as well. And at least I'm pretty sure, our drug prices here are a lot more expensive than in Asia, which means that we could actually be like starving the Asian people of necessary drugs for them because they just won't be able to afford the like really expensive prices. Like say for tuberculosis medicine, I think that can cost upwards of like $5,000 in some cases. And a lot of the workers in like Southeast Asia just don't have that kind of money. So we could actually be presenting a huge health risk to the people of Asia instead of worrying about America, we actually might need to worry about Asia here.
The Interior State Dispute Settlement provision in the TPP allows foreign corporations the ability to skirt the U.S. court systems by granting them the ability to challenge U.S. laws before an international board of arbitrators. This board of arbitrators can order the government to pay billions of dollars in damages. Is this provision a violation of U.S. sovereignty or a necessary tool that ensures the agreement is implemented properly?
This is certainly a provision that violates U.S. sovereignty. This ISDS, as it's referred to, is basically an international court run by where cases are decided by a board of arbitrators, quote unquote. And these arbitrators are corporate lawyers, or they're usually they're looking for people
Affiliated with corporations.
Affiliated with corporations. Thank you. And also that's the one aspect that allows corporations to take advantage of this ISDS, and the other one is that corporations are actually allowed to sue governments in this court, which is completely absurd if the people who are actually heads of the courts making the decisions, making the rulings, whose jobs are who are continuously hired by corporations. If they're deciding a case where it's pitting a government against a corporation, clearly there's a conflict of interest there.
Yeah, we've hit this point before. Like corporations, I would say, the TPP gives them a lot more power than they probably deserve.
And this is like the biggest point. This is like what gives them like the most power of all the points
Definitely.
in the TPP.
But the worst part is that majority of these cases, it will be a foreign corporations suing the U.S. government.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily empowering U.S. corporations, which can be argued helps the consumers of the U.S.
Yeah, they could exploit the U.S. systems.
Exactly.
And what's ridiculous is that once the arbitrators actually ordered the governments to pay, according to the Washington Post, once they actually, if they decide that a government must pay a corporation, they can enforce that through domestic courts. So they have basically the full power of U.S. courts they have the power of the U.S. courts to force the U.S. government to pay these corporations when they can sue over basically anything they want.
Yeah, and when you get sued, if a corporation was to sue a government and to win, who would be paying that bill? The government. It would be the taxpayers. We would have to be paying the corporation because it won this case. So that seems even more problematic when you look at it that way.
Definitely. This seems like it could be a possible power shift in the world powers, just economically. Because when you think about it, if a country exploits the systems of US, Canada, Japan, maybe, they can actually increase their economy or the power of their economy just a little bit, which actually could, through the TPP, this could affect world powers and the balance of power. The US could end up actually losing a little bit of its influence in the world just based on other countries taking advantage of this opportunity that the TPP gives them.
So instead of we have like government versus government power, we could have government versus multinational company power. So now instead of worrying about China, which is what this agreement was supposed to solve here, we'd actually have to be worrying about different multinational companies competing.
Definitely.
Yeah, the rise of the corporation has definitely been a huge theme lately in politics and local and recent media. For example, in the San Bernardino case, the FBI wants Apple to create a tool that allows them to hack into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone to look for evidence. However, Apple does not want to do this because it would frighten consumers away within the United States. So they're going to court about it. But the thing is, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, and Facebook are all unifying and backing Apple in this court case.
Really?
Yeah. So, the fact that a corporation has the ability to challenge the government and it has the chance to beat the government in this, and put profits before the safety of Americans is.
Yeah,
it
that
just
brings to
shows-
light one of my personal fears, just that the governments, or no, not the governments, the companies could end up actually controlling governments like worldwide, which could lead to a runaway consumer society. We could be ruled by monopolies instead of by democratic systems.
But the difference between that case, the Apple versus the U.S. government case there, would be that instead of it being held in the U.S. court, it's going to be held by the Board of Arbitrators, right? So it'll be held and it'll be judged by people affiliated with corporations, so there'll be obvious bias there. So then when a corporation sees something they don't like happening, they could sue and it won't be in our court.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting conundrum because ironically, Donald Trump actually wants Apple to be able to give over this tool to the FBI. I don't feel that it's one of his ploys to attract the American people. I feel like he actually believes it, and it's interesting because he's a far side Republican who has a net worth of $10 billion. So it's interesting how the American people on both sides unite on this issue.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there's bipartisan efforts against this agreement.
Do you want to know what this reminds me of? You guys, Batman: The Dark Knight. I'm not even kidding. At the end, you know that scene where Lucius hacks into all the phones in Gotham, and then it's like unethical to him. And I mean, if it's unethical in a movie, then really, I can't believe we're actually doing this in real life. I was actually not aware of this at all.
Okay, but the Joker was about to kill the whole city.
We're going to have to finish up after this.
I mean,
I don't think the situation is that dire.
do the
Thank you
ends
for
justify
watching.
the means?
Yeah,
All right. I think this is a good place to end. Thank you for watching the APR Political Review International segment, and we will see you next time. Thank you.